America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. And I'm Alfredo Ortiz, CEO of Job Creators Network. And today we're joined by Tudor Dixon. Tudor is a former gubernatorial candidate in Michigan and host of the very popular Tudor Dixon podcast on iHeartRadio and the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton podcast network. Tudor will also be joining us actually for the second JCN Freedom Fighters Summit. And she's going to be actually on a very exciting panel called Defeating the Debt Monster, Time for a Constitutional Amendment. So lots to talk about from that, and we'll preview some of that on this podcast. So Tudor, we're looking forward to seeing you at that summit. It's in Savannah, May 1st and 2nd. It's a great place, but it's going to have a lot of great conversation, and I think also have some fun. I think conservatives forget they can have some fun as well along the way.
Yeah, thank you for having me today. I'm excited about it because I think it's going to be a time for people to really kind of unpack what's happening after this major President Trump win. And a lot of people are saying, what does this mean? What does this actually look like for the country? But even on the state level, how does this affect? And obviously, we're going to be watching these special elections and what's happening going forward throughout the next couple of years. But there's going to be big races in 26. I think there's 36 gubernatorial races across the country. There's a few Senate races. There's a couple of those open Senate seats are going to be very highly monitored coming up in the next few years. So I think this summit will really kick off the discussion of what do we want from our politicians? What should we see them talking about? How do we see what is happening on the federal level with DOGE going into the state level? And who are the best people to kind of champion those efforts? So that's sort of what I'm expecting, but I don't know. Maybe I'm speaking out of school.
No, that's exactly right. And I think people are going to be excited. And as we go through this, if people are interested in getting tickets, it's JCN 2025 Summit. That's 2 M's and 1 T. Believe it or not, people are kind of getting it confused. So it's 2 M's and 1 T. JCN2025summit.com. So looking forward to seeing you there. So, all right, tariffs. Let's talk some tariffs because I think it's tomorrow is when tomorrow, Tuesday or Wednesday now. I can't even remember, but it's when the big tariffs really start kicking in. And obviously being in Michigan, it's a big deal. I saw UAW came out in support of the auto tariffs. But talk to me about tariffs. Like, what do you think? What's the reaction? What are the people telling you, the small business owners? What are you hearing out there in Michigan on this?
Well, I think in Michigan, especially seeing the UAW support this, I think that people in Michigan should be excited about this and feel like this is an opportunity to bring business back to the state of Michigan. And I know there's people saying, oh, there's going to be this pain and there's going to be an increase in prices, but there needs to be, from the standpoint of national security, but also just to ensure that we have careers for people here in the United States and the ability to continue to expand our economy, we need to bring things back home. We need to onshore manufacturing. And that's something that I think a lot of presidents have spoken about in the past. I mean, I remember Barack Obama talking about this, but it never happened. I mean, this was a big part of the whole Joe Biden campaign was we're going to support manufacturing, but it never happened. And I think part of it was because there is no understanding of what American jobs actually mean to someone who's been a lifelong senator, a vice president, a lifelong politician. He never really had to understand the private sector. And that's something totally different about President Trump. And I think that's where people are going, what does he really know about this? And this is not a government function. Well, no, it is a government function to come in and say, we have to protect American companies from having the Chinese come in and take over, having the Chinese take all of our parts, and then we're completely relying on them. And so as much as I hear the fear mongering from the left, I think you have to understand, as someone who comes from a steel foundry, it's so important that we have those types of industries back in the United States. I think we're down to about 3 universities in the entire country that have metallurgical degrees for students.
Wow.
If we are not able to make metal on our own, then we have no national security. I mean, think about what goes into making metal. You have to be able to make your military equipment.
Right, yeah.
I mean, any type of weapons, everything that you do, but also your farming equipment, also your construction equipment. We cannot be reliant on other countries for this equipment. And that's what President Trump has said. So when people say, what will these tariffs do? It's not an immediate effect. That's why he says we have to get started now. And that's the interesting thing to me, is that people are like, oh my gosh, this will take years. Yes, absolutely. And he has never been shy about saying it's going to take us years to get back on track from this globalist agenda that the radical left has put into place in this country. But if you don't start today, then we end up in a bankruptcy situation before we can get the country back on track.
Yeah, no, that's very well said. Tudor, in this society where immediate gratification seems to be the thing, right? With 2-hour delivery from Amazon Prime and stuff like that. I mean, does the American public have the patience to wait 1, 2, 3 years for this to kick in, to really do what it's supposed to do?
I don't think it's going to be felt by people as significantly as they think. I think when we talk about the American public having patience, that's going to be, I think it's more opportunity. If you look at a state like Michigan, where you're going to see factories that will come in and you'll see construction jobs right away. So it's like different layers. What we see as 2 years from now, we go, okay, 2 years from now, we're going to be making semiconductors. But in 6 months, or even 6 weeks, if we got rid of some of this overregulation that we have in some of these states, like the state of Michigan, we could be breaking ground. And if you're breaking ground, you're building jobs. So immediately you see that unemployment. I mean, I'm picking on Michigan because this is the state I'm from, but we have the highest now. We've just hit the highest unemployment rate in the entire country. Well, then we're in a desperate situation to get people back to work, right?
Right.
You start building jobs immediately. Electricians, plumbers, builders, construction workers, all of these people are coming in, excavators. Everybody has to come in and start working right away. So when we say the impact on the auto industry is 2 years from now, the impact on the economy is instantaneous.
Right. So, Tudor, I'm a messaging guy. Right. And I sit there and I look at everything that's going on, and I sort of feel like the administration is losing a little bit on the tariff messaging. Do you think they're doing enough to actually unpack what you just described, which is, hey, you know what, let me kind of walk you through the timeline of what you're going to see. In 3 months, you're going to see this. In 6 months, you're going to see this. In a year, you're going to see this. In 2 years, and then in 5 years, right? Because I think people just don't know what to expect, because it's not really being communicated. At least from my perspective, that's my perspective.
Well, I think that's why partners like JCN are so important, and the summit that you're doing is so important. And that's something that the Trump administration has used to their advantage, and they understand how to use that to their advantage, where they get these summits and they have people have these wider, broader conversations. And as you said, I think we're 30 days out now. So we're very close to the point where you're going to have some of these in-depth discussions. And that's what you saw President Trump do on the campaign trail with podcasts. He went and he had these long form discussions so people could really visualize it. Now, is that the place for the president right now? I mean, he's busy running the country, so he can't sit on podcasts day after day. So that falls on folks like us and folks like you, and that's why Job Creators Network is so valuable right now, because people can go to this podcast, they can go to others, but we can also elevate that. So folks like me and folks like, Elon Musk and those people who are able to elevate that message, will come to these summits, will take what the clips from these summits and say, look, the American people need to fully understand why this is beneficial. And it falls on us to help spread that message. As you've heard Donald Trump say, we are the news. You can go out there and you can cut through the leftist media. And I think the leftist media is doing a good job of kind of suppressing what's happening with bringing back manufacturing. So yes, I think it's critical that we go out there and we support what he's doing and tell the truth about what's happening.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think that's exactly the conversation. And we kept it small, the summit in May, intimate really, because we wanted to make sure that we had quality discussions. I mean, we've all been to those big conferences or 15,000 people, and it's just people up there that you can barely kind of see. And, we want to really make sure we have these kinds of solid conversations so people walk away with kind of, here's what I need to go do. So we're excited about that. Again, that's the summit. That's our second summit in Savannah, Georgia on May 1st and May 2nd, JCN Summit 2025. So is where you can get the tickets. And I'm excited to be able to have you there. And so, in addition to tariffs, we are seeing a little bit of kind of a softness in the consumer confidence. Just on Friday, University of Michigan came out with a number that looked pretty soft from a consumer sentiment standpoint. And as you know, the economy is driven still by the consumer. So what are your thoughts on where the economy is and where it's going, and what can we expect? I know Friday, for example, is a jobs day number. I'm curious to see what you think that might happen on Friday and what we might see.
Well, I think that there's going to be a lull before you see some of these jobs come back, because as we just said, you're going to have to bring manufacturing back. I mean, in Michigan, I think it was last week or the week before, there was an announcement that we would shutter a plant in Dearborn, Michigan, and there would be 650 jobs lost there. So you still see the effects of the Biden administration very strongly in states that are historic manufacturing states that haven't had the support that they needed. And in the midst of trying to figure out how to come back from these electric car mandates and actually start manufacturing again. I mean, we have the Lightning plant that was shut down here from Ford because they just couldn't sell the Lightnings. This was just not a strong enough product for them. So we're trying to come off of that right now and make sure that we can bring back this economy. So I think you will see a bit of a lull before you see that return. And I don't think that's something the administration has been shy about saying, hey, we're trying to come back from something that was really rough. I mean, I look at even just in my town right now, it's been kind of shocking. I'm in small town America here, and having some of these big box names like Party City and Joann's Fabrics and those companies closing right as Donald Trump gets into office because of the effects of this economy that we've been dealing with for so many years under Joe Biden. So I do think that there is going to be a time frame where consumers are going, man, we're seeing all these terrible effects. We're seeing restaurants close. We're seeing big box stores close. We're not sure. I mean, some of the Macy's, I think, announced that they're closing. When you see that, there's kind of a bit of I can see that where consumers would step back a bit and say, what does this actually mean for the economy? But Donald Trump has been very open about the fact that he has to bring it back from that point, that he inherited something that was in terrible shape. And I trust that will turn around, but it's going to take a few months.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And again, I think to your point earlier too, that's what makes what you and I do actually so important, to make sure that we help, the average person understand what exactly is going on. And when they see the unemployment, numbers slowly tick up, because I think we're going to see that, because to your point, we're seeing the effect of a Macy's closing down or Joann's Fabrics and stuff like that from the Biden administration, the high inflation that they suffered. They just couldn't keep up. We're going to start seeing those numbers. I mean, it's unfortunately there's that period where he is going to have to basically deal with the aftershocks of the Biden administration. And I think it is incumbent on you and I and others who are going to be at the summit, for example, to talk about this and be able to take back to, whether it's to their podcasts or their constituents or their listeners. I mean, we're going to have, great folks on there, like Hugh Hewitt and yourself, and Charlie Gasparino is going to be on there, and Mike Gallagher from the Salem Radio Network. I mean, these are all folks who have really loud megaphones as well, and we need to make sure that we, I think, educate folks on what needs to be really said to the American public so that they understand the challenges and the issues that they're going to see, and that they can take a little bit of I would say, of a sigh of relief. I'm telling you, I'm hearing from small business owners. There's a lot of worried small business owners out there. They know they love President Trump. They're just a little worried. And I think rightfully so. But we just got to tell them that it's going to be okay, basically, and that this is all part of the process and we're going to get through it.
Well, and I think when I look at my state and I think some of the other leftist states, they're scrambling to put in more regulation. They're trying so desperately to crush this administration. And I mean, they're very openly saying it. Mallory McMorrow, who is a state senator here in the state of Michigan, she has been pretty clear that she is planning to run for the U.S. Senate seat. A radical, a dangerous radical. And she's out there saying we must stop Donald Trump. We have to get more regulation. We have to control more. I mean, in the state of Michigan, she is a proponent of raising taxes as much as she can. She's one of these people that had saw the Detroit Lions winning and immediately said, let's put in an entertainment tax because we can get more money for the state. And yet they continue to spend the money on their billionaire investors. And that's where I think that we also have to take back the narrative, because in some of these cases where you see some of this unemployment, I mean, like I said, Michigan's the highest in the nation. You got to look at Michigan, you look at California, you got to look at Illinois, you got to look at New York and say, how much are they having an impact on the country? And the federal government can only do so much. But that's why you hear so many people talking about statewide DOGE type of agencies. And I say that because in the state of Michigan, it is very difficult to open one of these factories that Donald Trump is talking about bringing back to the United States. And that, I think, has been somewhat eye-opening to the public here. And I think it's similar in Illinois, New York, California, all these leftist states, Colorado. It's very challenging because of the amount of regulation. When I talk to you about, well, you can start with building jobs right away, because if you go to Indiana or you go to North Carolina, you can break ground in 6 weeks. Right. But if you come to Michigan, the regulations are such that you can't. And one thing that I think is interesting that someone was telling me the other day, in Texas, they're not huge proponents of renewable energy. We all know this. They are, that's the oil state, but they have, I think, the highest amount of renewable energy in the entire country. And if you kind of peel back the layers of the onion and you say, well, why is that? They also believe strongly in free markets and getting government out of the way. So for people who want to build solar farms or they want to have wind farms, they can do it much faster in the state of Texas because they don't have to get all these permits. They don't have to have everybody come out and inspect. They are trusted to do their job. In the state of Michigan, the governor here wanted to have 100% renewable energy by 2035. They haven't been able to put any in since she implemented that, I think, 2 years ago, because they can't get past her own regulations. Think of how bizarre that is.
Yeah, that's just crazy. I mean, we're hearing, kind of sort of unrelated, but just regulation wise. I mean, in California, for example, where, the disastrous wildfires, I hear there's only been 7 permits that have been allowed so far for rebuilding. I mean, this is, California will never be rebuilt at this point. It's just horrible.
But that's where you and I are in the position where we have to educate people. Right. Why do you think, Bill Maher has been out saying this. Why should the California government decide whether or not my roof was done right? It's my roof. If it falls in on me, I should be responsible. Exactly. But when you step back and you think about that, because I think we're so used to being like, oh yeah, the government has to make sure I'm okay, And when you step back and think about what Bill Maher is saying, you're like, yeah, what the heck? Why? Right. One of the folks in our office here was telling me he had his deck, he extended his deck. The original deck had been approved. So think about this. Original deck in the house approved. They extended it, but every time you build anything on here in Michigan, you have to have an inspector come out and look at it. Even if it's the deck in your backyard, they extended the deck. The inspector came back, didn't like how the original deck was attached to the house, and they had to redo the original deck. That had already been approved by an inspector years before. So imagine how challenging it is to grow in these states when they're completely controlled by government.
Hi, everyone. I want to personally invite all of you to come to JCN's second Freedom Fighters Summit and Gala on May 1st and 2nd in beautiful Savannah, Georgia. This event is going to be a who's who of conservative political figures. Media stars like Hugh Hewitt, Sarah Carter, Trish Regan, and Mike Gallagher will be joined by political minds like Kellyanne Conway and Steve Moore, as well as Governors Glenn Youngkin from Virginia and Brian Kemp from Georgia. You'll also get to meet yours truly and Alfredo Ortiz, the hosts of Main Street Matters, and many of our past guests. There'll be great entertainment too, from the comedy legend of Rob Schneider to music by country superstar Lee Greenwood. There's a limited number of seats, so reserve your spot today. Go to jcn2025summit.com and use promo code JCN2025 BOGO50 to get a second ticket at 50% off. Again, go to jcn2025summit.com now and use promo code JCN2025 BOGO50 to get a second ticket at 50% off. And get your tickets before they sell out.
I know you're a proponent of Doge overall and what's happening with Elon Musk. But I think you just mentioned a little bit, you're also a proponent of kind of statewide. And I would actually even say we should do that, but even go further, local municipalities. I mean, when you look at the amount of tax dollars between your local, your state, and your federal, and well, of course, in Florida, for example, there's no state tax, but in most cases, right, you've got three levels of taxes. How much waste exists out there when you think of all the different levels of government? All the waste and abuse and redundancy. I mean, what you just mentioned. I mean, and by the way, we pay all these people, these inspectors, to do this stuff,
Right.
Tax money. So I mean, what do you think? And what would it take to get a Doge in your state? I mean, other than probably an act of God.
I mean, a new governor, that's for sure. And there will be a new governor in 2026 because Gretchen Whitmer is term limited. But I think that in the past, we've had.
And that's where we'll have Governor Dixon then, right?
I mean, I think that has a nice ring to
It
it.
has a nice ring, doesn't it? Yeah, I like it.
But I
You
mean,
heard it first. Tudor Dixon announces 26 run.
we're not announcing yet. We're looking at it. But I do think that there is an opportunity. And it's interesting because you look at what happened with Donald Trump's run in 2020 and everybody was like, oh my gosh, what a devastation. But God had such a great plan putting him into office 4 years later because none of this would be happening. And on the statewide level, I think it's very similar. When you look at these states, they've become so bloated. I mean, we have an environmental agency that won't allow businesses to move. We have a DNR that won't allow the hunting industry to flourish. Michigan is, I think, in the top 5 for deer and car collisions. So imagine that you have hunting that has been so repressed that we are putting people's lives at risk every day on the road because of that. And I think those are things that people don't think about, but that's what government is meant to think about. Government is meant to say, okay, there are all these factors that can happen that can hurt people, and how do we make sure that we get out of the way so it doesn't happen? But government is so in the way that you can't even hunt in the state anymore. It's become so, all of these laws, everything is so convoluted here. That's where I think on the state level, it kind of has to, you kind of have to go in and wipe out. You have to have new directors. You have to go have directors that are willing to go into their agencies, just like you've got cabinet secretaries at the federal government level that are going into their agencies and saying, who is absolutely essential? Hate to say the essential workers comment might come back to bite them in the butt, but we need to know who is essential in the federal or in the state government and the federal government to say, we can actually give people in the state their money back.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that what President Trump and his team with Elon Musk is kind of showing to the American public is that we actually can take basically this back, right? But this whole government bloat that has happened over the past probably 20 years. I mean, when you see the size of government, how it's increased, right? I mean, I think there's hope in people's minds that wow, we can actually reverse this, right? Because you are getting to the point where we're at $38 trillion in debt. I mean, how do you get out of that, right? I mean, it's just so mind-boggling. I think the average American was just like, I guess this is the way it's going to be. I think President Trump is setting a path that hopefully, like you said, state governors, will follow. If obviously Republican governors, I'm hopeful eventually you'll at least have some on the left that will start seeing that they have to do this. But do you think that he is kind of setting kind of like a path for others to follow on this one?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the numbers, the Democrat Party is abysmally low. I mean, this is the lowest they've ever been at for favorability. You look at Donald Trump and he is higher than he was in his first term. So people are definitely looking at this and saying, I mean, something has got to give. We can definitely admit something's got to give. And that is our money. So why is it going to gender studies in Uganda or something crazy, where this is not drinking water. This is not, they're lying to you when they say this is keeping people alive. No, these are bizarre things that we're seeing money go into other countries, if it's even going there, because we're coming to find out. I mean, we've got Stacey Abrams with $2 billion that she's required to spend in 21 days. Who could spend $2 billion in 21 days unless there was something nefarious going on? And I think we have to be honest about the fact that government has been this fund for grifters for way too long, but that's our money. It shouldn't be going into the pockets of a senator's wife or a senator's husband. It should be used for the American people, or it should be in the American people's pockets. That's it. We should be spending it ourselves, And I think that's the same on the state level. And people, I mean, from my perspective on the state level, people panic when you say this because they immediately say, what will happen to our kids? Will our schools be okay? That's the number one question I hear. What will happen to our schools? And I think that's something Democrats can weaponize very easily. And yet here we are, for example, here in this state, 41st in the nation for schooling, for public education. So why can't we improve our schools? If we have this great budget for our schools, why are we in the bottom 10 and we have kids that cannot read? Because, Alfredo, we know if kids can't read, they end up in jail. That equation happens almost every single time. If you can't read, you end up in prison. This is for the safety of the state. You've got to do something about making sure that the schools are not just funded, but they're actually effective.
No, absolutely. It's interesting. We're talking about the summit, which again, you're going to be part of, and JCN2025summit.com is where to get your tickets. But we are going to have great conversations like the ones you and I are having right there, right now. But we're also going to be talking about extending the tax cuts. We are going to talk about deregulation, education freedom, which you and I are just talking about right now. And I do want to circle back to you on that one. We're going to be talking about debt and deficit, which is your panel, and then the Hispanic vote. Again, that's JCN2025summit.com, Savannah, Georgia, May 1st and May 2nd. So you can get tickets for that and listen to the wonderful Tudor Dixon, maybe make an announcement, maybe not. I'm not sure. But no, on the education front as well. I mean, so important. I mean, one thing that I spoke to the president about is like, to make America great again, we have to make America smart again. I mean, unfortunately, look at that number, 41. The numbers are abysmal. We're the number one in terms of spending per pupil, and almost the last when it comes to, spending across countries. I mean, it's just ridiculous for performance. Something has to change. I'm so excited to have Linda McMahon, by the way, as the new education secretary, and basically have her work herself out of a job, because there's no need to have the Department of Education. There really isn't. I think we need to push that. And Bill Bennett's going to be at the summit as well, the former education secretary. He actually had an interesting proposal, which is not only take it away from DC, take it all the way down to the parents. Let the parents actually decide what's best for their kids. What a novel idea, right?
Right. Well, and I think that's something that we've had that conversation on our side of the aisle for quite a long time. I think there's a lot of fear mongering about getting rid of the Department of Education, but people don't realize that the Department of Ed is actually a state's issue, not a federal issue. And so you certainly don't need an entire 4,600 person agency at the federal government to decide which funds should go where. That can come out of a different agency. This is simply a funding mechanism from the federal government standpoint. So it's not as though they're making curriculum. They have nothing to do with school lunches. All of these lies that you're hearing from the radical left right now, that's simply not true about the federal Department of Ed. The Department of Ed on the statewide level, they're making those minute and those important decisions about your child's education from the public ed side on the state level. How do you get more parents involved? I think it's not just parents, because in some cases at the public school level, you have parents that are simply not going to be involved. And that's something that I think we can't ignore, the fact that we are also here to make sure that we're raising up the best people out of our public schools and that they're getting the best attention they can possibly get, whether parents are involved or not. And I know that's not a popular discussion, because if you are a parent, you're likely going, well, I'm very involved. But you know what? Your neighbor may not be. And that's sad that child doesn't have the same attention. So how do we make sure that kids are getting the most possible attention? And I do think that that's something that we need to step back with our state level departments of ed and say, what are the downfalls? What can we provide? How can we provide more coaching, more groups, more teamwork, more of this, so that there is community within the schools, but not the kind of community that the Democrats want. They want to be able to vaccinate your kids on site, total health care. We're going to, offer abortions, all of this kind of stuff. Let's offer coaching. Let's offer life, the chance of understanding what life is like in a team, because let's face it, life is being a part of a team, right? So let's make sure we have that. Let's make sure that the kids that need lunch have lunch. Those are the things that I think that we need to start looking at on a statewide level. And then also, the key to any child's success is being able to read.
Yeah.
Those fundamentals of reading, writing, and math, it's crazy that we are not concerned with that.
Right. Yeah, no, it's unbelievable. And the test scores are just abysmal. Really, we have failed 50 plus million kids, basically.
Yeah, globally, we don't show up. Globally.
It's horrible. It's just really pathetic. How do we, just staying on the education front for a second, because I'd love your thoughts, because let's play this out a little bit, and you are Governor Dixon, let's say. Then you have you have the state that was blue that's been a disaster. You look at Governor Youngkin, what he's been trying to do with Virginia, for example. He hasn't had the legislator, right, to be able to help him do what he needs to do, which is very frustrating. I've had a lot of conversations with him. How do we, for example, get the change that you would want in that state on education to happen? Let's say if you don't have the legislative body behind you to do it, and what Governor Youngkin is running into right now.
And Michigan is somewhat unique. The Department of Ed is outside of the governor's purview in the state of Michigan. The superintendent is elected, and they are kind of a separate entity. And so you have control, obviously, budgetary control. I'd love to see a partnering of the governor's office with the state superintendent to discuss really, like, let's put partisan issues aside and talk about success for kids. And in Michigan, we have this unique situation going on right now where women outnumber men in the number of students that graduate from high school and go to college. So suddenly that has reversed, and we're struggling to get young men into universities. And I know there's a push to say, well, young men don't need to go to universities, but there's something more going on. And we would be remiss if we didn't step back and say, why is this happening? I do believe in the state of Michigan, our test scores are just too low for the confidence level of young men to go into universities and actually get a degree. So we do have to step back and say, we've got to look at this. We've got to come together. And as a mom, I think I have a kind of unique perspective. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is, like, what is my biggest barrier to education and outside help? Because we've talked about getting kids back on track from the pandemic. And you think about that, man, 5 years now, we've done nothing.
Yeah.
Isn't that shocking?
Yeah. Nothing.
In 5 years, the state of Michigan has not implemented a tutoring program, has not helped these students get back on track. We have kids that lost critical education priorities. They have not received that education that they desperately needed. Is there a way to have transportation? My biggest barrier is transportation. My kids have to go to soccer. My kids have to go to after school tutoring. Sometimes they have to stay after on Wednesday afternoons at our school. If they need to get caught up on schoolwork, they're required to stay. I have to figure out a transportation issue, how I get that transportation taken care of if my kids have to stay after. Well, in a family that can't do that, this is an impossible situation.
Right,
so is that the X we have to solve for in the equation, But that's where I think you have to step down and say, okay, if you've got 2 plus X equals, what? How do you solve for X here?
Right.
And we haven't been willing to sit down and do that. And I don't know that it's transportation. That's where I see that I've had issues, and I talk to other parents, and that's what they say. Well, gosh, if we could get after school tutoring and after school help for kids and then have a second set of buses, is that an option? Something like that where we get kids back on track. We've got to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tudor, as always, your insights are always amazing, and I always love having conversations with you about this stuff. We're going to be able to do this again in just about a month in Savannah, Georgia on May 1st and 2nd. JCN2025summit.com is where you can get tickets. And folks, you can come listen to Tudor and others, have some great conversations about great topics. And Tudor, I think our time is up. Again, thank you so much. I could talk to you for hours. As you know, I think we've done that before. It's always great. Thank you again for agreeing to be part of our summit, and I look forward to seeing you there. And thank you, everybody, for listening, for taking the time to join us on Main Street Matters, America's Small Business Megaphone. We thank you again for your time. And Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. So please subscribe at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcast. And we'll be back soon with another episode of Main Street Matters. Goodbye for now, and thank you, Tudor, once again.
Hi, everyone. I want to personally invite all of you to come to JCN's second Freedom Fighters Summit and Gala on May 1st and 2nd in beautiful Savannah, Georgia. This event is going to be a who's who of conservative political figures. Media stars like Hugh Hewitt, Sarah Carter, Trish Regan, and Mike Gallagher will be joined by political minds like Kellyanne Conway and Steve Moore, as well as Governors Glenn Youngkin from Virginia and Brian Kemp from Georgia. You'll also get to meet yours truly and Alfredo Ortiz, the hosts of Main Street Matters, and many of our past guests. There'll be great entertainment, too, from the comedy legend of Rob Schneider to music by country superstar Lee Greenwood. There's a limited number of seats, so reserve your spot today. Go to JCN2025summit.com and use promo code JCN2025BOGO50 to get a second ticket at 50% off. Again, go to JCN2025summit.com now and use promo code JCN2025BOGO50 to get a second ticket at 50% off. And get your tickets before they sell out.